What would you do if the woman quietly mopping your hallway turned out to be the only person who could heal your disabled daughter and the sister you never knew you had? The city of New York never really sleeps. Down below, yellow cabs weaved between traffic lights and pedestrians rushed across streets with coffee in hand. Skyscrapers sparkled in the early morning light, reflecting power, movement, life. But on the top floor of one of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings, inside a penthouse worth more than most people would see in 5 lifetimes, there was no life. Just silence. Jack Callahan stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, a mug of untouched coffee cooling in his hand. The man who once commanded boardrooms, closed billion-dollar deals, and graced the covers of Forbes looked hollow. He wasn't thinking about market shares or corporate strategy. His mind was in the corner of the room where a little girl sat in a customized wheelchair, staring blankly toward the sunlight. Emily, his daughter, 8 years old. Her head tilted gently to one side, her fingers curled tightly against the armrest, twitching slightly but involuntarily. Born with cerebral palsy, she had never spoken a full word, never taken a step, never reached out for him. Never called him Dad. Jack used to imagine fatherhood differently. He dreamed of piggyback rides and bedtime stories, of cheering on the sidelines at soccer games, of messy pancakes on Sunday mornings and sleepy hugs at night. But those dreams died the same night Helen, his wife, his anchor, did. She had passed away giving birth to Emily, and in return, he had been left with grief and silence. A soft sound, almost a whimper, escaped Emily's lips. It was more breath than voice, but Jack heard it. He turned instantly, the tension in his shoulders melting for a brief second. He walked over and knelt beside her, brushing a strand of her soft brown hair back from her forehead. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered. "Didn't mean to leave you alone." Her eyes fluttered toward him for a moment. That was all. She didn't smile. Didn't respond. He gently took her small hand in his, cradling it between his palms. "It's just us now, Em," he murmured, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Daddy's here, okay?" She blinked, slow and uncertain. Jack lowered his head, resting his forehead against her fingers. They didn't move. That's when he felt it, not just grief for his wife, but grief for the father he never got to become, for the little girl who never ran into his arms, for the family that could have been. All the wealth in the world, and he couldn't buy a single word from her lips, couldn't buy a smile, couldn't unlock the girl trapped in that little body. The silence in the room was deafening. From the intercom, his assistant's voice echoed faintly, reminding him of a board meeting at 10. Jack didn't answer. He wasn't going anywhere. "What's the point of power?" he muttered bitterly, "if you can't fix the one thing that matters?" Moments later, the sleek glass doors of the penthouse slid open and closed with a sharp hiss. The latest therapist walked out briskly, coat folded over one arm, eyes downcast. Jack didn't move from the kitchen island as she approached with an envelope in hand. "I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan," she said with clinical distance, avoiding his gaze. "Emily isn't responding to any of our techniques. It's like she doesn't want to be reached." Jack signed the final invoice without a word. As the door closed behind her, silence returned like a loyal enemy. Vanessa Blake, Jack's older sister, had been seated across the room with her arms crossed and jaw clenched. She finally stood. "That's the 3rd therapist in 6 weeks," she said, her voice tight. "You can't keep doing this, Jack." He shot her a look. "I'm paying them more than anyone else in the country. They should be working miracles." Vanessa didn't flinch. "You think money solves everything. But this isn't a business deal. This is your daughter." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. She turned away before he could see the moisture in her eyes. Jack sighed and glanced toward Emily, who sat with her cheek resting against the glass window, unmoving. "Then what do you suggest, Vanessa? A priest? A psychic? Should I just clap my hands and hope she walks?" That's not what I'm saying, she said sharply. Maybe what Emily needs isn't another professional with a clipboard. Maybe she needs someone who sees her, not just her condition. Jack didn't answer. He walked away, footsteps echoing against the marble floor. In his home office, he loosened his tie and sank into his leather chair. His eyes landed on the photo of Helen smiling, holding newborn Emily, unaware of how hard life would get. Somewhere deep down, he knew Vanessa wasn't wrong, but he wasn't ready to admit it. Not when control was the only thing he had left. That night, Jack stayed in the office long after the city had gone dark. A single glass of scotch sat untouched beside his laptop. He stared at numbers, spreadsheets, forecasts, anything but the truth. He felt like a man who had lost everything, except the illusion that he still had something to offer. Then came a quiet knock. Logan Pierce, his assistant, stepped in holding a thin folder. His expression was hesitant. "Sir," Logan said quietly, "there's someone I'd like to suggest. Off the record." Jack didn't look up. "Unless it's a miracle, save it for the morning. She's not a therapist, not even close," Logan continued. "She cleans for the church I go to." "But there's something about her." Jack raised an eyebrow. "A cleaner?" Logan nodded. "Her name is Ava Carter. She doesn't have credentials, but she connects with people in ways I don't understand. She helped my nephew smile for the first time in months after his mum died. All she did was show up and see him, really see him." Jack leaned back, skeptical. "And you trust her?" Logan met his gaze. "With my life." The room went still. Jack stared at the folder in Logan's hand, just a name scribbled on a piece of paper. Ava Carter. He didn't know it then, but the woman in that folder wasn't just about to change his daughter's life. She was about to rewrite his entire story. When Ava Carter stood in front of the penthouse doors, she hesitated, not because of the glass, steel, or sky-high views, but because of the weight she could already feel behind those walls. Her palms were sweaty, her modest tote bag neatly packed with basic supplies. She wore a navy blouse and black flats. Her dark hair was pulled back into a low, neat bun. She looked more like a librarian than someone meant to clean a billionaire's home. She wasn't there to fix anything. She wasn't even sure why she had agreed to come. All she knew was that Logan Pierce, the assistant who'd contacted her, had spoken with quiet urgency. "It's not about cleaning," he'd said. "It's about presence. Just be who you are." That felt vague. But Ava had learned long ago that not everything meaningful came with instructions. The door opened with a soft hiss. Logan greeted her warmly. "Come in," he said, his voice low and calm, like he was afraid of waking something. As Ava stepped into the penthouse, the first thing she noticed wasn't the view, it was the silence. It clung to everything like dust. The place was immaculate, spotless marble floors, perfectly arranged furniture, but it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a museum, built to impress, but not to live in. As they walked through the hallway, she caught a glimpse of a little girl near a window. Emily. Her head rested against the glass, her arms limp in her lap. Her gaze didn't follow their movement, but something in her posture made Ava pause, just long enough to see her. Truly see her. She didn't speak, she just walked on. In the kitchen, Ava unpacked her things. She didn't start with small talk or questions. Instead, she hummed quietly to herself as she wiped down Countess a lullaby her mother used to sing, soft and rhythmic, almost like a whisper. She moved slowly, deliberately. Not rushing, not performing. She treated the space like it had breath. Behind a corner, Jack Callahan watched, arms folded across his chest, eyes skeptical. He was ready to dismiss her at the first hint of awkwardness or pity. He had seen too many people shrink in the presence of his daughter, seen too many therapists force smiles or speak in sing-song voices that rang hollow. But Ava didn't speak to Emily. She didn't even approach her. She simply existed. calm, present, humming. And then something happened. Emily's eyes moved. Just a fraction. Tracking the soft circular motion of Ava's cleaning cloth, Ava noticed she didn't react. She kept humming, kept moving. From behind Jack, Logan whispered, "She's watching her." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Coincidence." "Maybe," Logan said. "Or maybe she sees something the rest of us don't." Later that afternoon, when Ava finished her shift, she quietly packed up her things. Before leaving, she glanced once more toward the little girl by the window. She smiled, not with pity, but with something deeper, something like recognition. Jack noticed that too. He didn't say anything, but for the first time in months, he wondered if maybe the silence wasn't permanent. Maybe it was just waiting for the right note to break. The next morning, Ava returned. No fanfare, no expectations. Just her soft steps, her quiet energy. This time, she brought nothing but a small Bluetooth speaker and a scarf tucked into her tote. As she dusted a shelf near the fireplace, she noticed a small, faded music box tucked behind photo frames. It was delicately carved, its silver finish worn with time. When she wound it, a hesitant melody played a classical waltz, slightly off-key, but familiar. She didn't ask permission. She simply carried the music box to Emily's room, placed it gently on the side table, and whispered, "Let's see if you like this." Emily sat motionless. Ava wound it again. This time the melody played a little longer. And then Emily's left hand twitched. It was small, subtle, but Ava saw it. She didn't celebrate. She didn't say a word. She just sat cross-legged on the floor beside her and listened. Outside the room, Jack leaned against the wall, frozen. He hadn't heard that melody in years. Helen, his late wife, used to play that exact waltz every evening before dinner. The music box had been hers. Now here it was again, in the hands of a stranger, cracking open something long sealed shut. "That was Helen's," he said hoarsely, stepping into the room. Ava looked up, her expression open but not apologetic. "It's beautiful," she said. It's the first thing that made her look away from the window. Jack crouched beside Emily. "She's never reacted like that," he said softly. "Maybe it's not about reaction," Ava replied, "but connection." The words hit harder than Jack expected. He said nothing, but in the quiet that followed, something shifted. The silence didn't feel so hollow anymore. It felt full, as if something had taken root. That evening, after Emily had been put to bed, Ava stepped out onto the balcony for air. The city below buzzed like a faraway echo. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a frayed piece of pink ribbon. It was tied once around her ankle during her final ballet performance 12 years ago, the night her career ended in a sharp snap and a hospital bed. She hadn't danced since. But today, something in Emily's gaze had stirred something long dormant, the possibility of purpose again. She stood slowly, extended one arm into a graceful arc, then the other. Her feet stayed still, but her upper body flowed like water-soft, fluid, free. Behind her, the glass door creaked. Emily sat inside, watching. Ava smiled and continued. She mimicked shapes from old routines, her hands painting rhythm into the air. "You like this, don't you?" she whispered. There was no reply, only eyes that did not look away. "I used to dance every day," Ava said gently, lowering herself to sit cross-legged, facing Emily. "And when I couldn't anymore, I stopped breathing without realizing it." There was no pity in her voice, just truth. "But maybe it's not over. Maybe we can start again, together." From the hallway, Jack had been watching. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply stood, hidden behind a curtain, watching two people, one broken by fate, the other by injury, find something wordless and real. And in that stillness, hope took its first breath. It was quiet that morning, not the kind of silence that feels empty, but something softer like the hush of a theater just before the curtain rises. Ava Carter arrived at the penthouse without cleaning supplies. Instead, she carried a small tote, a Bluetooth speaker, and a folded scarf patterned with pastel notes and tiny stars. She moved like she always did, lightly, as if the air didn't need to be disturbed to make an impact. In Emily's room, sunlight spilled across the floor in golden lines. The little girl sat in her wheelchair near the window, still as ever, her head slightly bowed, hands resting in her lap like folded wings. Jack wasn't home. He had gone in early for a board call, leaving Ava alone in the space that had become sacred ground. She placed the scarf over her shoulders and turned on the speaker. Soft, playful, instrumental music filled the room. Not too loud. Not demanding, just enough to set a mood. Then, without a word, Ava began to move. She didn't dance in a way you'd see on a stage. She swayed gently, arms extended, scarf fluttering like a breeze caught in fabric. Her feet barely left the ground, but her whole body responded to the music like it was something she could drink in. Emily's eyes followed her, not for a second, not a glance. A full, steady gaze. It wasn't dramatic. There was no gasp, no tear, no movie moment, but Ava noticed. She didn't stop. She let the scarf float through the air and dip near Emily's knees. As it brushed against the girl's legs, she gave a quiet, exaggerated gasp like the fabric had surprised her and bowed playfully. A flicker passed over Emily's face. Then came a sound. It wasn't a word. It wasn't even intentional. But it was there. A short, raspy laugh. Real, raw, uneven. But unmistakably, joy. Ava froze. Slowly she turned back toward the girl, kneeling just a few feet away. Her heart thudded in her chest, but her voice stayed calm. "Was that you?" she whispered. "Was that my sweet girl laughing?" Emily's chest rose and fell. Her cheeks flushed pink, another burst, a second laugh, shaky, soft, but clearly a response. Ava didn't rush in, didn't cry. She smiled wide but held herself steady, giving Emily space. Behind her, a sharp intake of breath echoed in the doorway. Jack. He stood frozen, one hand on the doorframe, his face pale. He'd arrived earlier than expected and walked in just in time to hear the sound that changed everything. He had heard Emily cry. Moan. Whimper, but never this, never joy. He dropped to his knees beside his daughter, eyes wide and brimming. "Emily," he choked out, voice breaking. "Sweetheart, you're in there." "I knew it." Ava gave them space. She stepped back, scarf still in hand, blinking away her own tears. She didn't need applause. She didn't need credit. This moment belonged to them. Word of the breakthrough spread quickly. That afternoon, Vanessa Blake arrived unannounced, as usual. Her heels clicked across the marble floors with familiar authority, but there was something different in her walk and urgency, a fire. She found Jack in the kitchen, staring at nothing, with a half-empty mug of coffee in his hands. Before he could speak, she cut in. "Is it true?" she asked. "Did Emily laugh?" Jack nodded slowly, like he was still trying to believe it himself. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "And you think it's because of her?" She didn't say Ava's name. She didn't need to. Jack met her stare. "I don't think. I know." Vanessa crossed her arms, skeptical. "Jack, she's not a therapist. She doesn't have a license. You're letting a cleaning lady run emotional therapy on your daughter." "She's not running therapy," Jack replied calmly. "She's connecting. Something no one else has managed to do." Vanessa shook her head, pacing. "This is dangerous. If something goes wrong, if Emily regresses, what are you going to do? Still defend her?" A soft voice interrupted. Ava had walked in. She didn't retreat. I understand your concern, she said gently. I'd feel the same in your shoes. Vanessa turned, sharp and dismissive. I don't think you do. But before she could continue, Jack stepped between them. Enough, he said firmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it landed like a gavel. You saw Emily before, he said, looking at his sister. Detached, silent. You saw how every expert failed, and now she laughs. She tracks movement. She reacts. Ava's doing something the rest couldn't. Vanessa stared at them both, lips tight. This isn't a fairy tale, Jack. No, he said. It's a miracle, and I'm not going to push it away because it doesn't wear a lab coat. He turned to Ava, his voice softer now. Do you still want to be here? Ava nodded. No hesitation. Yes. Then you stay, Jack said. Vanessa didn't argue. She just stood there, stunned, as Ava turned back toward Emily's room where soft music still played and a scarf still fluttered. Just before she left, Vanessa glanced inside and stopped. Emily was smiling. Not a big smile, not exaggerated, but real. Ava twirled the scarf through the air, making silly shapes. Emily's eyes followed, her mouth slightly open, her shoulders shifting as if trying to mimic motion. Vanessa stepped back, confused and shaken. She didn't know what to believe anymore. For the first time, she had no rebuttal. Later that evening, Jack found Ava on the balcony again, leaning on the railing as the city pulsed below them. Today changed everything, he said. She didn't respond immediately. The wind tugged at her hair. Not just for Emily, he added. For me too. Ava turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. It wasn't me, she said softly. It was her. She just needed someone to move at her pace. Jack smiled faintly, eyes tired but warm. Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. They stood in silence for a while. Not awkward, companionable. Ava reached into her pocket, gently running her fingers across the frayed ribbon from her last performance. She wants to move, she whispered. She just doesn't know how to ask. Jack nodded. Then we'll help her find her rhythm. They turned back toward the light behind the windows, where Emily sat quietly, waiting. And somewhere between the music and the stillness, a new kind of conversation had begun. The morning sunlight poured into the penthouse like warm honey, soft, golden, and full of promise. But no one dared speak of what might happen today, not even Ava Carter, who stood barefoot in the open living room, laying out a padded mat where the rug used to be. She moved with quiet focus, checking each corner of the foam tiles, adjusting the light, placing a small Bluetooth speaker on the nearby table. She didn't say this out loud, but her heart was pounding. Today, they were going to try standing. Emily sat in her wheelchair by the window, wearing a simple pale yellow dress and soft braces hidden under her tights. Her eyes were wide, alert, a little nervous, but not afraid. Jack Callahan hovered nearby, holding a small rolled towel and a fresh cup of water with shaking hands. He had barely slept. He had dreamed of this moment for 8 years, but never allowed himself to believe it would actually come. Vanessa Blake stood silently at the doorway, her arms crossed. No longer critical, just watchful. Even she had begun to feel it, that strange, blooming possibility no one wanted to name for fear of scaring it away. Ava kneeled in front of Emily and gently placed her hands on the girl's knees. Just one step, she whispered. Not because we need it, but because you can. She helped Emily transfer from her chair to the floor mat carefully, slowly, with quiet support under her arms. Jack was ready to intervene at any sign of discomfort, but Emily didn't flinch. She allowed it. She trusted Ava now, and that in itself was a kind of miracle. Ava didn't rush. She crouched beside her, letting the music begin, something playful, calm, with a subtle beat, like a heartbeat. Emily, she said softly, just feel it. I'll help you, but you lead. Emily's knees trembled, then almost imperceptibly her right leg shifted. Her foot slid forward on the mat. The movement was awkward, uneven, barely half an inch, but it was hers. She wasn't pushed. She wasn't guided, she moved. Ava gasped and covered her mouth. Jack dropped to his knees, stunned, silent, his eyes welling with tears. "Oh my God," he whispered. "That's it." "That's your step. That's your first real step, sweetheart." Emily's face twitched, focused, determined. Then her left leg followed, shuffling slowly to catch balance. She wobbled. Ava steadied her from behind but didn't take over. Emily leaned forward, her arms stretched slightly like tiny wings learning how to fly. And for a few glorious seconds, she stood. Not perfectly, not without help, but upright, alive, present. Vanessa, who had stayed frozen near the doorway, clutched the wall for support, her eyes brimming. Her voice broke in a whisper. Helen would have given anything to see this. Jack reached forward and wrapped his arms gently around his daughter. He pressed his forehead against hers. "You're my hero," he whispered. "You hear me?" "Not the doctors, not me, you." That night, the penthouse felt different. Not lighter, deeper, like something sacred had been unearthed. After Emily had fallen asleep, the music box sitting quietly beside her, Jack and Ava sat at the kitchen island. They didn't talk much. There was no need to. The silence wasn't oppressive now. It was companionable, warm. Jack stared at his mug of tea, untouched. "I've never seen her like that," he finally said. "That smile, that strength." Ava nodded gently, hands folded. "She's always had it," she replied. "She just needed someone to speak her language." Jack exhaled, looking down. "You know, I used to think I had it all figured out. Money, timing, control." His voice softened. "But none of it mattered when Helen died. The empire I built, it didn't hold me. It didn't raise my child. It just stood still with me." Ava looked over, her expression gentle. "I know that kind of pain," she said. "When I tore my ligament 12 years ago, my career ended overnight. The next day, my mom passed." Jack looked at her, startled. "I blamed myself for a long time," she continued. "Thought maybe if I hadn't been chasing spotlights, I'd have been home with her." She paused, breathing through the memory. "She left me a letter. Said, 'Don't stop dancing. If not for the world, then for someone who needs to see it.'" Ava let out a quiet laugh, soft and cracked. Took me a decade to figure out what that meant. Jack's expression shifted. He didn't say it aloud, but something in him saw her now, not just as Emily's miracle, but as a woman quietly healing alongside them. "You're not just here for her, are you?" he asked, voice low. Ava looked up, surprised by the question. "You're healing too," Jack said. She hesitated, then nodded. "I think we both are." The next morning, Ava arrived with something new. A soft cloth, matte pastel-colored, decorated with tiny musical notes, and a pair of light ankle shakers with bells that jingled gently when moved. She didn't announce anything special. She just rolled out the mat in Emily's room, turned on the music, and knelt beside her. "You don't have to move today," she said with a smile. "I'll do the dancing." Ava strapped the shakers to her own ankles and tapped her toes to the beat. The bells made a soft jingle, playful and steady. Then she placed one bell in Emily's palm, curling her fingers around it slowly. "If you even feel like lifting it," she whispered. "That's enough." 15 minutes passed. Then, something unexpected happened. Emily's fingers twitched. Not just once. Twice. Ava stopped mid-step. Jack, standing behind the curtain, held his breath. The bell jingled just once, lightly, but deliberately. Ava crouched beside her and whispered, "That's it. That's your music. You're talking in a new way." Emily blinked. Her fingers lifted again slightly higher. The bell rang clearer. Jack stepped forward, his eyes glistening. "She's never done that," he said, voice cracking. "Not even in therapy, not even close." Ava smiled through her tears. "She's responding because someone's finally listening." Jack sank to his knees beside his daughter, holding her other hand gently. "You're changing everything," he said. Ava shook her head. "I'm just listening." That day marked a turning point. No more silence, just small, deliberate sounds echoing through a room once filled only with grief. And somewhere inside those soft jingles, Emily was learning how to speak. Jack Callahan stood in the doorway of the spare room Ava had unofficially turned into a workspace. Scarves, soft bells, sketchbooks, and sticky notes were everywhere. The once pristine penthouse now carried signs of movement, of life. But Jack didn't mind. For the first time in years, the mess meant something. Ava Carter sat on the floor, cross-legged, folding a stack of small therapy scarves with care. Her fingers moved with rhythm, almost like choreography. Jack watched her for a long moment before finally speaking. "I've been thinking," he said softly, "what if we built something permanent?" Ava looked up. "You mean like a center?" He nodded. "A place where kids like Emily can heal. Not with therapy in the traditional sense. With movement. Rhythm, connection, just like you did." Ava sat back slowly. The thought overwhelmed her. "Jack, I don't even have a degree. I'm not trained to run something like that." He walked into the room and crouched beside her. "You don't need one. You have something better." She looked at him, unsure. "You have results. You have vision, and you have Emily's laughter. That's more proof than any diploma can give me." Her hands trembled slightly as she set the scarves down. "I never imagined anything like that," she whispered. "You built my daughter's first step," Jack said gently. "You've already done the hard part." The next day, they sat together at the dining table. Jack had spread out financial projections, blueprints, and contact lists. Ava brought a notebook with hand-drawn layouts, soft rounded spaces, flowing rooms, areas without sharp corners or fluorescent lighting. "No clipboards," she said firmly. "No cold waiting rooms, just warmth and motion, music in the walls." Jack smiled. "You're designing a sanctuary. Not for escape," she said quietly. "For discovery." That night, under the soft glow of rooftop lights, they reviewed the first official sketch. In the center was a large open room labeled The Floor. "No tables," Ava explained. "Just fabric, sound, and space for movement." That's where Emily laughed. "That's the heart." Jack ran his finger along the design. "And these? Private movement pods. For one-on-one time. Some kids won't want a crowd. They need to feel safe enough to begin." Jack looked over at her not with the admiration of a grateful father, but with the quiet awe of someone watching a story unfold that was bigger than either of them. "You're not just a cleaner, Ava," she smiled. "I know that now." 2 weeks later, they stood before a group of potential investors. Jack wore his usual tailored suit, but his tone was differentless, polished, more grounded. He spoke of Emily's journey, of silence, of laughter, of a scarf in motion and a girl who followed it with her eyes for the first time. And when a woman in the back asked, "What exactly qualifies this woman to lead such a program?" Ava stood up before Jack could respond. "I don't have a title," she said. "I don't have letters after my name. What I do have is a little girl who didn't move for 8 years until she danced." "That's my resume." A hush fell over the room. Then someone at the far end, an older woman with silver hair, spoke quietly. "My grandson hasn't spoken since the accident. But when he hears a violin, he hums. I think you might be onto something." Jack gave a small smile. The Lily Center, as Ava had named it, was becoming real. That night, Ava returned home to find Emily already asleep. She sat beside the bed and pulled out a worn page from her notebook. She'd scribbled one sentence, "A place where movement speaks louder than words." As she traced the words with her fingertip, she looked at Emily's small hands resting beside the pillow. They'd once been still, now they moved to music. The center wasn't just for Emily anymore. It was for every child waiting in silence. And now, someone was listening. The sky was soft grey on the morning. The Lily Center opened its doors. No red carpets, no speeches, just sunlight filtering through glass windows and the quiet hum of something beginning. Inside, pastel-colored scarves floated gently from the ceiling. Soft drums lined the walls. Fabric mats rolled across smooth floors like rivers. Everything was designed to invite, not overwhelm. Ava Carter stood near the entrance in a pale pink blouse and simple flats. A small lily-shaped pin clipped to her collar glinted in the morning light. She looked calm, but her hands trembled. This wasn't just a job. It was her heartbeat. Beside her, Jack Callahan adjusted Emily's headband as she sat in her wheelchair, dressed in a soft yellow dress. The little girl's eyes sparkled. This was her space now. Her name was in every corner. One by one, families began to arrive. Children with walkers, some in wheelchairs, others clinging nervously to a parent's hand. Some of them didn't speak, some wouldn't make eye contact, but all of them had a story, and all of them were met not with charts or check-ins, but with music, movement, and space to just be. Ava took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Welcome," she said gently, her voice carrying over a small PA system. "Here, you don't have to speak to be heard. And you don't have to move the way others do to be seen." Soft applause followed. Then music began to play low and rhythmic. Therapists moved barefoot across the open floor, inviting families to join. Parents hesitated at first, then slowly, shoes came off, scarves lifted. Feet tapped. Emily was the first to move. She held a bell and tapped it against her open palm. The sound was faint but deliberate. A little boy nearby noticed. He did the same. The ripple had begun. Later that afternoon, Ava sat alone in her office, catching her breath. Her eyes welled up as she looked through the glass at children laughing, spinning, swaying. "Is this what love can build?" she whispered. Jack appeared in the doorway. "You built this," he said. She shook her head, tears sliding down her cheek. "No," she replied. "Emily did." Her laugh did. On the third day, a woman entered the center with a boy who looked older than the others. 10, maybe 11. His name was Success. He had a sharp frown etched into his face, his jaw tight, arms folded. He wouldn't look anyone in the eye. "He doesn't talk," his mother said quietly. "Not since his dad left. He says music makes his chest hurt." Ava crouched beside him. "That's okay," she said. "You don't have to talk. You don't even have to dance. You can just be." She led them to a soft corner space filled with pillows, light fabric, and no sound. She didn't push. She didn't explain. She just let him sit. As she turned to walk away, Success made a low grunt. She didn't look back. She just smiled. Got it. For the next few days, he barely moved. He sat with his arms crossed while other children danced. When instruments were passed out, he pushed them away. But one afternoon, a boy dropped a tambourine. It rolled across the floor and bumped Success's foot. He picked it up, just held it. That night, Ava whispered to Jack. "It moved." "The tambourine?" Jack asked. "No," she smiled. "Him." The following day, Ava left a small wooden shaker near his mat. By the end of the session, it had been moved. Not far, just slightly, but enough to matter. "Progress," she whispered. Jack nodded. "He reminds me of Emily." "Me too," she replied. Just taller and louder in the quiet. That evening, Success's mother returned to pick him up. She stopped cold when she saw him. He was holding the shaker in his lap. "He hasn't held anything in months," she whispered. Ava gently offered her a seat. "He's not just holding it," she said. "He's listening. And listening is where everything begins." Logan Pierce had always been the calm one. In the whirlwind of building the Lilly Center, scheduling meetings, balancing budgets, dealing with zoning boards, he kept things moving. But this had him pacing in his office at 2 a.m, a manila folder clutched in his hands like a live wire. He had only been trying to help with the grant paperwork, but a search through old public records led him to a birth certificate. Ava Carter. Mother's name, Lillian Carter. Father's name, Richard Callahan. Jack's father. At first, Logan thought it had to be a coincidence, a clerical error, a duplicate name. But when he cross-referenced handwriting, signatures, and even scanned in a journal page from the Langston family estate, there was no denying it. Ava Carter wasn't just Emily's miracle. She was Jack's half-sister. The shock knocked the wind out of him. He couldn't decide what to do. So, he called the one person who knew how to handle family secrets, Vanessa Blake. She showed up within an hour. Logan handed her the documents without a word. She flipped through them slowly, her eyes narrowing, her shoulders stiffening. Then she whispered, "Oh my God." She set the folder down with shaking fingers. "My father had another child." Logan nodded. "She doesn't know." Vanessa looked at him, voice quiet and stunned. "And Jack? He has no idea." They sat in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on them like a winter sky. Vanessa finally spoke. "We can't let her hear this from the wrong person." Logan nodded. "This changes everything." The next morning, Vanessa returned to the old family estate, the one she'd avoided since their father's passing. She entered the dusty study where Richard Callahan had once written checks and dodged responsibility. In the bottom drawer, she found what she was looking for. A weathered journal labeled C.L. Charles Langston, her father's name, before he'd changed it for business. Inside, pages of guilt, letters addressed to my second daughter, regretful confessions, mentions of missed birthdays, apologies never sent. One line hit hardest. "Her name is Ava. I've never met her, but I made arrangements. If she ever finds her way to this family, let her in." Vanessa closed the book with trembling hands. "You coward," she whispered. "You left us all in the dark." Back at the Lilly Center, Jack was in the rooftop garden with Emily, her head resting against his shoulder, a blanket wrapped around them both. The sun hadn't fully risen, and the sky still looked like wet paper. Vanessa approached quietly. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice softer than usual. Jack turned to her. "What's wrong?" She handed him the journal and Ava's birth certificate. He read slowly. His eyes scanned the page, then again, and then he just stopped. He didn't look up, he didn't speak. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came. "She's my sister," he finally said, more to himself than to anyone else. Vanessa nodded. "Neither of you knew. But now, you do." Jack's hands trembled as he set the papers down. "She's not just a miracle," he whispered. "She's family." He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, the old journal open beside him, the truth echoing through every line. Ava, the woman who saved his daughter, who taught him how to feel again, the one who helped rebuild a home from the ashes of silence, was his sister. Not a metaphor, not a twist of fate, blood. Part of him felt betrayed. Part of him felt blessed. All of him felt overwhelmed. By dawn, he made the decision. "I have to tell her," he told Logan and Vanessa in the courtyard. "She built her life on honesty. She deserves the same." Vanessa nodded slowly. "She may walk away, Jack. This changes everything." "I know," he said. But so did she. Later that morning, Ava arrived, unaware. She smiled as she walked past the open floor where children moved with scarves and bells. She passed the therapy room where Emily was giggling softly with a visiting specialist. Jack waited for her in the office with the documents laid out. When she stepped inside, she knew. The air was different. "Is Emily okay?" she asked, instantly alert. "She's fine," Jack said gently, "but there's something you need to know." He handed her the folder in silence. She flipped through it, confused, then stunned. Then shaken. She looked up slowly. "Your father. Is my father?" Jack nodded. Ava stepped back as if the truth had weight. "All this time, I thought I was just a guest in your world," she whispered. "Turns out, I've been standing in my own family's shadow." "You didn't stumble into our lives, Ava," Jack said, voice tight. "You were meant to be here." She looked at him, overwhelmed. "I need time." And she walked out, not in anger, but with a heart too full to carry. The fog rolled over the city like a quiet curtain, softening the skyline and muting the honks and chaos of Manhattan below. On the rooftop of the Lilly Center, Ava Carter stood alone, arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on the distant grey horizon. She hadn't slept. Not really. The folder Jack gave her still sat unopened beside her bag, but the truth inside it echoed in her bones. She wasn't just the woman who helped Emily take her first step. She was Jack's sister. Blood, family. She had been walking through her own story this entire time and hadn't known it. She wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that she hadn't known, or the fear that now everything would change. The rhythm they had found, the trust they had built, the peace. Would it still matter? Or had it all been a mistake wrapped in a miracle? She heard the door open behind her. Footsteps. Then silence. Jack stepped up beside her. He didn't try to hug her or speak too soon. He just stood, looking out at the same uncertain sky. "I understand if you can't come back," he said quietly, "but I wanted to thank you before anything else. For Emily. For me. For the rhythm you brought into a life that had none." Ava didn't answer right away. She swallowed hard, her eyes never leaving the fog. "I came here as a cleaner, remember?" she whispered. "Now I find I've been cleaning up my own history the whole time." Jack turned to face her. "You weren't just part of the story," he said. "You were the missing page." She looked at him. "So, what now? Do we pretend nothing changed? Or do we start over with this truth between us?" He exhaled. "We start again. Not from the beginning, but from where the music led us." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, Ava nodded. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not because of blood, but because of purpose." They sat down on the bench, side by side. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Ava laughed softly, almost to herself. "You know what's funny? I spent most of my life feeling like I didn't belong to anyone. And now I find I've been healing the family I never knew I had." Jack smiled, resting a hand gently over hers. "You didn't come to us by accident, Ava. You were called home." That afternoon, inside the Lilly Center's open floor, children danced beneath ribbons and light. Emily took 3 steady steps, supported by a therapy rope, her bell jingling in perfect time. Ava stood at the wall and watched with quiet pride. She wasn't confused anymore. She wasn't running. She had found her place, not just in this building or this mission, but in a family that had begun not with blood, but with laughter, movement, and healing. And the next day, during a morning movement session, Ava noticed success. The quiet boy who once refused to lift a finger, now sitting forward in his mat, hands on his knees, waiting for the music to begin. He wasn't dancing yet, but he was ready. "Let's go, buddy," Ava said with a wink. He didn't smile, but he nodded. That was enough. Later that evening, as she walked through the halls of the center, Ava passed by a quote etched into the glass just outside the main floor. She hadn't noticed it before. It was in Jack's handwriting, where silence becomes song and every child finds their dance. She stood there for a long time, tracing the words with her fingers. Not because she needed reminding, but because now they belonged to her too. It was a quiet Friday morning, the kind of morning that didn't announce anything big, but held the hush of something waiting. Ava Carter arrived early at the Lilly Center. The halls were still bathed in soft light. The music room hadn't opened yet. The children hadn't arrived. But one small girl was already there, wide awake, Emily Callahan. She sat in her therapy room, her back straight in her wheelchair, her hands resting softly on the armrests. Her eyes, though, were wide and focused, alert, eager, alive. Jack knelt beside her, gently adjusting her arm braces. "She's been extra focused today," he said, brushing her hair from her face with the tender expertise only a father could have. Ava smiled and pulled a ribbon from her bag. It was bright yellow, Emily's favorite, and one she had responded to earlier in the week with a slow, careful smile. "Want to try the ribbon again, sweetheart?" Ava asked. She placed it gently into Emily's palm, curling the girl's fingers around it. Then, with her other hand, Ava guided the movement, slow, like painting circles in the air. Emily followed, her grip light but firm. Her eyes locked on Ava's face, and then something changed. Urgency. In Emily's gaze, her lips parted. Ava stilled, her breath catching. Jack looked up, confused at first, until "Jen," came the sound. Faint, dry. Strained, but real. The air left Ava's lungs all at once. She dropped to her knees beside Emily. "Did she?" Jack whispered, wide-eyed. Ava leaned in close. "Emily, can you say that again, baby?" Emily blinked once, then twice. She inhaled carefully, and in a broken whisper like she was pulling it from a long-buried well, she said it again. "Jen, dance." Ava burst into tears. Her hand flew to her mouth. Jack dropped beside them, his voice cracking with emotion. "You spoke, baby. You spoke." He pulled Emily gently into his arms, careful not to shift her too fast. He rocked her against his chest, both of them trembling. Ava pressed her forehead to Emily's, whispering through tears. "You found your voice, didn't you? You've been listening all along?" Emily's smile was crooked but unmistakable. She understood. The news spread through the center like wildfire. Therapists cried. Parents applauded. Even Vanessa, who had just arrived for a staff meeting, caught the second word as she walked down the hallway. "Jen, again." Vanessa stopped in her tracks, hands trembling, eyes wide. Then she turned to the wall, leaning against it, overcome. That night, for the first time, Emily's story wasn't just about survival. It became a story of sound, of words, of undeniable hope. Later, after the center had closed for the evening and the last child had gone home, Ava sat beside Emily's bed with something new in her lap. Helen's journal. Jack had given it to her earlier in the day, a private gesture of shared memory. She wrote this for Emily, he had said, before she ever met her. Now, Ava opened the pages and read aloud, her voice soft and steady. "My sweet Emily," Helen had written, "I don't know what your life will be like, but I hope you laugh often, dance without fear, and find someone who sees you for who you are." Emily stirred. Her fingers twitched. Her mouth opened slightly, as if trying to echo the rhythm of the words. Jack stepped into the room just in time to hear the final line. "She believed someone would help her," Ava said, looking up. Jack knelt beside them. "She believed in things I couldn't see," he whispered. And maybe she was right. A hush settled over the room. But this silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like the space between notes in a song, full of possibility. 1 year later, the center smelled like lavender and hope. No camera crews, no red carpets, just a quiet celebration built on movement, music, and miracle. It was the first anniversary of the Lilly Center, and inside the newly renovated auditorium, the seats filled with families, parents, children, therapists, teachers, many of them once strangers, now bound by shared stories. Jack Callahan stood backstage in a dark suit, a small lily-shaped pin on his lapel. His hands were steady, but his breath was not. He glanced toward the front row, where Ava Carter sat with Emily, their hands gently clasped. Emily wore a soft white ballet dress, trimmed in gold, her hair pulled into a low bun. Her braces were hidden beneath matching tights. She stood with support but proud, radiant. When Jack took the stage, the crowd hushed. "A year ago," he began, voice steady but thick with meaning, "we opened these doors with a dream. And a memory. A dream to help children be heard without words, and a memory of a little girl who once stared out a window in silence." He paused, scanning the audience, his eyes lingering on Ava. "What most of you don't know is this center wasn't built with concrete or money. It was built with rhythm, with trust, and with the courage of one woman who walked into my home as a stranger and gave my daughter, and me, something I never thought I'd feel again. A heartbeat." A hushed murmur rippled through the room. Jack drew a breath. "That woman is not only the co-founder of the Lilly Center. She is my sister." Gasps turned to applause. Ava blinked back tears. Emily smiled and gently leaned her head against her shoulder. "This place," Jack continued, "was never about bloodlines or buildings. It was about belonging, and today we celebrate every child who found their way here and every whisper that turned into a song." Backstage, Emily waited quietly, holding a piece of the scarf Ava had once danced with. It had become her lucky charm. Ava knelt in front of her. "Are you ready?" she whispered. Emily nodded. No fear, no hesitation, just quiet fire. The lights dimmed, the audience fell silent, and the curtain rose. A soft waltz began to play. Emily stepped forward, alone, her arms rising in delicate curves. Her feet shook slightly, but she held her ground. She moved slowly, gracefully, with intention. Every motion told a story, of struggle, of healing, of finding breath in a body that once wouldn't move. Ava joined her midway through, not to lead, but to follow, mirroring her movements, like a sister following the music in her heart. When Emily stumbled briefly, the audience held its breath, but she caught herself. She smiled. When the final note played, she raised her arms like a flower opening to the sun. The auditorium erupted. Cheers. Tears. And Jack, clapping the hardest, stood tall in the front row, his heart full to bursting. "She's her mother's daughter," Vanessa whispered beside him, eyes misty. After the performance, Emily ran into her father's arms. He lifted her as if it were the first time. "You are magic," he whispered. "You are my miracle." Ava stood off to the side, watching them with a quiet pride that couldn't be spoken aloud. Then she turned to the wall behind the stage. Etched in glass, lit from behind, were the words she had once scribbled on a napkin. "The Lilly Center, where silence becomes song, and every child finds their dance." She placed her hand over the words, her heart full. "We did it, Lily," she whispered. And the little girl, no longer hidden in silence, replied clearly, "We all did." In the quiet corners of life, healing often begins not with medicine, but with presence. This story reminds us that love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through small gestures. A song played softly, a hand held in silence, or a stranger who refuses to give up. Jack's journey as a single father, paralyzed by guilt and grief, shifts the moment he allows someone else to care. Ava, once unseen and forgotten, becomes the light his daughter needs not because of shared blood, but shared hope. The lesson is clear. Family is more than lineage. It's found in those who show up, stay, and believe in us when we no longer believe in ourselves. And for those who feel too old to start again, this story says otherwise. Redemption doesn't keep a clock. Healing doesn't have a deadline. Whether you're 9 or 90, we all deserve a second chance to be seen, to be heard, and to dance once more.